Hi, Maddie and Eli. Daddy here again. I hope you guys are still well and as happy as you can be, being all cooped up. Some good news is I may have a new mobile phone coming soon, which means I'll be able to start recording some nice music for you again, which would be nice. Um, on the other hand, the bad news that came out this morning was that on the news was that some things in Britain may remain closed until Christmas, which is 8 months away. So it doesn't look like there's a great deal going to change around here anytime soon. But, I've given up worrying about these things. What will happen will happen. So, anyway, today I'm going to talk a little bit about your grandmother Brenda. Um, Not much because enough has already been written about her as a writer, her professional life, by other writers and journalists and reviews and all that kind of stuff. Um, and of course, I've also released previous videos on here before this whole global crisis, began happening. And my eulogy at her memorial, which of course says a lot about her professionally, but also personally. And you're in that too. Um, that was uh, that was a good while ago now. 3 and a bit plus years now, I think it was. There's also a retrospective on here for you kids, just to remember her. And there's also a video I made to not celebrate, what the word, kind of commemorate Mental Health Awareness Week. Or is it day? No, I think it's week. Anyway, so that's also on YouTube for you to watch. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about her because there's not a vast amount more to say other than totally bonkers stories. But I do find it constantly amazing how in her life she managed to span a great deal of the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall and communism in general across Europe. Of course, technically the fall of the Berlin Wall was the official end of the Second World War, although of course everyone says 1945. The Yeltsin coup in Russia, which of course I remember from the front page of the newspaper that would come through the letterbox every morning, Yeltsin standing on the tank in Red Square. That was pretty incredible. She lived through NASA space race and the 1969 moon landing. Must have been an extraordinary moment for mankind. The Salman Rushdie affair, incredibly important, of course, for us writers and freedom of speech in general. The Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, which again I remember from the front page of the newspaper, that horrible, horrific picture of the explosion shortly after takeoff. And many, many, many other things. And the amazing thing is that she managed to live through all of these things without really noticing any of them. Not one. And I said to her once, do you remember the JFK assassination? You must remember the JFK assassination. She said, oh, yes, 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 yes. No, 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 no. I do remember that well. Why? What happened? Did you hear it on the radio? Was it on the news? I mean, do tell, do tell. She said, oh, and this is typical Brenda. This is very, very, very Brenda Williams. She said, oh, no, 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 no. I remember the JFK assassination because it was the same day I got my first period, which I thought was lovely and rather charming and a very sweet way to remember it, but also extremely her. Her menstruating life began with JFK's assassination. One just couldn't make it up. I just thought it was fabulous. Unbelievably, though, as well, to me, is that she was alive for a whole year when Richard Strauss was still alive. She was born 1948 in December, and he died 1949, which I find astonishing. I mean, if you listen to his four last songs and you think my grandmother was alive at the same time as this guy, it's just astonishing to think that feels like so long ago. There's another little story about that, actually. I think Richard Strauss's funeral was conducted by a very young conductor, up and coming conductor called George Schulte, who later became, of course, Sir George Schulte. And I knew George Schulte, not just because he was a neighbour of ours on Abbey Road in St John's Wood when I was growing up, and we'd hear Pavarotti rehearsing Otello. When Pavarotti came over to his house to rehearse Otello, the only time Pavarotti sang it in a concert version in Carnegie Hall, we could hear Pavarotti singing, rehearsing it when we walked down the Abbey Road, which was astonishing. And again, a bonkers story. But yeah, no, but I knew Schulte from the Royal College of Music. I'm not sure what position he played. He might have been a patron, but he certainly came in and he was present quite a lot of the time, so I knew him. But a very curious little thing was many years later, say 2011 or something like that, I was accompanying the West Hampstead School of Dance, which is where I met your mum. And this new girl joined, and the ballet mistress said to me, "Oh, that's George Schulte's granddaughter." So I did the maths in my head, and I worked out that the age this girl was, she could never have met Sir George Schulte, her grandfather, her very, very famous grandfather. And the whole time I was sat there playing, obviously it wasn't my place to say anything, it would have been inappropriate. But I can't, I will never forget looking at this girl going, I knew your grandfather, and you never will, and you never have. And I just thought that was an astonishing coincidence for that to happen. But then it's my life, it's full of bizarre coincidences. Um, One thing I will say, of course, is we're related, while we're on the subject of famous musicians and composers. We, of course, are the latest in the Bird line from William Byrd, the composer. So you actually are the latest in the Bird line. For a long time, that was me. A lot of us have been musicians and composers, but most of us have been in some way in entertainment, whether it's acting or other things. Um, so yeah, and a funny thing was that I think my mum and my dad, Bob the Beard and Brenda Williams, apparently only spent one full weekend together intimately on one-to-one basis. And I was the product of that. I always called myself a love child. And my mum always used to say I was, if it hadn't been for Schubert's Great C Major Symphony, I would never have been conceived. So that piece has always held a special place in my heart. I have a certain affinity with that piece. I can't hear the opening horn call without going, oh yeah, I know where I come from. But so that's astonishing, to conceive a child just on one weekend. But that has a funny little postlude, which was you, dearest Eli, were born, not conceived, born before the first anniversary of the very first date me and your mum ever went on. So if you go on the average pregnancy being 10 menstrual months or 9 full months, whichever you prefer, then that will give you some idea of the speed at which you were conceived. So again, in a way, you are a love child too. And it's nice to feel part of history. It's nice to not disconnect yourself from that. But it also implies that us men on our side of the family are incredibly potent, which is funny. But anyway, so enough of this. And I'm hoping to go for a walk in a bit. And so fingers crossed, I get this new phone and I shall record some nice songs for you. Because now I'm health-wise completely back to normal and my voice is working beautifully. I had a bit of a sing last night. And yeah, I shall speak to you tomorrow. Daddy loves you always. Mwah.